Okay, so we are up to Pirkei Avos, Per Gimel, Mishnah Ches in the strict count where we count each statement as a new Mishnah. This is a very short one, and I think what I envision for tonight is I have three meforshim who seem to have like three slightly nuanced takes on the same idea, and I'd like to get the main idea and then get as much as we can from the nuance, and then we might explore a couple other maybe one other interpretation, but we'll see where it goes. Okay, so it says Rabbi Elazar ish Bartosa Omer, ten lo mishalo, she'ata v'shelcha shalo. V'chein b'David hu Omer ki mimacha kol umiyadcha nasanu lach. Okay, anyone want to try translating that? Obviously, we have Rabbi Elazar, man of Bartosa, says, okay, ten lo mishalo.
Give to him from what is yours.
Give to him
Mishalo
from what
his?
is his, yeah. From what from what is his, okay. She'ata v'shelcha shalo.
Because you and what is yours is his?
It is, yeah, exactly. Okay. Give to him from what is his, because you and what is yours is his. Okay. Or I guess say you and what is yours are his. Yeah. V'chein b'David hu Omer, likewise, with David, he says, Ki mimacha hakol umiyadcha nasanu lach. How do you translate that?
Because everything is from you.
Yeah.
And from your hand, you gave it to us.
Yep.
Nasanu,
Exactly.
is that
Yep.
past?
Yep. It's past. Yeah. Correct. Yeah. So because everything
gave us
from you, umiyadcha nasanu lach, and from your hand, you gave us, and that is from Divrei Hayamim, 29:14. Okay, very short Mishnah. Okay, and then the good text of the Mishnah says, I think it's exactly the same except for minor differences. Rabbi Elazar ben Yehuda ish birtosa Omer telu mishalo sha'at v'shalach shalo hu Omer b'David kimi machal kol umiyad chanasan alach. Yeah, so pretty much the same thing. No significant differences. Okay, so what are the questions? Anyone? I'll put this here. Might be a short share. Yeah, Yel.
I guess what are you supposed to give?
Okay, yeah. What are you supposed to give? Yeah, so I guess more broadly speaking, what is the subject of the command in the Mishnah? Okay, good. Yeah, Lauren.
Well, I think because it calls Hashem lo, when you also wrote him with a capital H, I'm assuming that means Hashem, but I guess like if it's Hashem, why does it say like lo him instead of directly Hashem? I don't know if that's a good question then.
I'm not sure. You mean why would?
Or what should we give to Hashem? Well, no, that's already the first question.
Right.
I meant like why would it refer to Hashem as lo as opposed to saying like give to Hashem what is yours? I guess.
Okay, that's like a stylistic question.
Yeah,
meaning, okay, so since lo is talking about Hashem, why use the pronoun instead of the proper noun?
Yeah, also because I know it's referring to Hashem, but I guess it's like I had to kind of infer that as a
right,
it wasn't obvious right away.
Words,
so that's why I'm
why does it leave it up to our inference? Yeah. Okay, yeah. Yeah, Ayala?
Maybe this is the same question. Did you like? I guess the meforshim specify that it's Hashem specifically, because I was thinking of like give this other guy because it's Hashem's or something like that.
So it will be very clear from the context of Divrei Hayamim. In fact, let's actually just read the context of Divrei Hayamim now instead of like leaving that for the questions. All right, so I decided, I always like to err on the side of more context rather than less. And I'm just going to read it in English because it's very long, 19%. Okay, so this is the very end of Divrei Hayamim Aleph, and you'll get the context here. This is has to do with the base of Mikdash. King David said to the entire congregation, "Solomon, my son, is but lone." Okay, hold on a second. I scanned this from my phone. So there might be some typos, but they're not my typos. They're my phone's typos. God has chosen him, although he is young and tender, and the work is great, for this palace is not for a man, but for Hashem, God. With all my might, I have prepared for the temple of my God, gold for golden things, silver for silver things, copper for copper things, iron for iron things, and wood for wooden things, as well as shoam stones, stones for setting, emeralds, tapestries, and all kinds of precious stones and marble stones in abundance. Furthermore, because of my desire for a temple of my God, I have treasures of gold and silver that I have given for the temple of my God, beyond all that I prepare for the sacred house, 3,000 talents of gold, of Ophir gold, 7,000 talents of fine silver, with which to overlay the walls of the buildings. There's gold for golden things and silver for silver things, for all the work done by artisans. Now, who volunteers to consecrate himself for Hashem today? So that was the question. Then we get the response. Then the leaders of the fathers' houses, the leaders of the tribes of Israel, the leaders of thousands and of hundreds, and the officers of the king's property offered donations, giving for the work of the temple of God 5,000 talents and 10,000 darkins of gold. I don't know what a darkin or a talent is. 10,000 talents of silver, 18,000 talents of copper, and 100,000 talents of iron. Sounds like a lot. Whoever had precious stones gave them to the treasury of the temple of Hashem under the auspices of Yechiel the Gershonite. The people rejoiced in their donations, for they donated wholeheartedly to Hashem. King David also rejoiced with great gladness. Now here we go. Now this you might recognize from Shacharis. And David blessed Hashem in the presence of the entire congregation. David said, "Blessed are you, Hashem, God of Israel, our forefather from this world to the world to come. Yours, Hashem, is the greatness, the strength, the splendor, the triumph, and the glory. Even everything in heaven and earth. Yours, Hashem, is the kingdom and the sovereignty over every leader. Wealth and honor come from you, and you rule everything. You rule everything. In your hand is power and strength, and it is in your hand to make everyone great or strong. So now, our God, we thank you and praise your splendorous name." Okay, now we get to our pasuk. "For who am I and what is my people that we should muster the strength to donate in this manner? For everything is from you, and from your hand we have given to you. For we are like sojourners before you, like temporary residents, as were all our forefathers. Our days on earth are like a shadow, and there is no hope to escape death. Hashem, our God, all this vast amount that we have prepared to build you a temple for your holy name is from your own hand, for everything is yours." That's another thing, by the way, that is similar. We have prepared to build you a temple, your holy name, for your holy name. Wait, for all this vast amount that we prepared to build for your temple, your holy name is from your own hand, for everything is yours. One of the meforshim is going to quote that. "I know also, my God, that you examine the heart and desire integrity. I have offered all these donations in the uprightness of my heart, and now I see your people who are present here to offer donations to you with gladness." Okay, so that is the context, and it is clear from the context that this is talking about Hashem, and that's why all the mefarshim interpret this as being about Hashem. So fair question. I think if you had this in the vacuum, how do we know that lo is to Hashem? But it is unanimous that it's to Hashem. Okay, other questions? Yes, Yael.
Why does he say that? Like because everything is his is the rationale for giving?
Okay, good. So how is everything is his the rationale for giving? Like, what's the argument? Yeah, Ayala.
Also, in what sense are you giving if it's already his?
Okay, yeah, right. It feels like he's pulling a fast one here somehow. Like there's some like at least in some sense it's not his, right? Otherwise, how can you say that you should give? Yeah. So if it is truly his, then how do you ask it again? Say it again.
In what sense?
Yeah, in what
are you giving?
Sense are you giving, right? Giving presupposes ownership, your ownership, right? Okay, yeah. All right, that's a good question. Lauren?
I guess like how is this supposed to be like for a chassid? Like what's the message that a chassid is supposed to take away from this?
Okay, right. I want to show you, by the way, I did not end up using this commentary, but actually, you know what? I don't want to show it to you now. I'll show it to you after we list our questions because I think he might spoil one of the questions. So I'll just hopefully remember that. So what? How are we to understand this in the framework of Pirkei Avos, which presumably is directed towards people who are striving to become Hasidim. Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit? I think it's a good question, but were you thinking along any lines like that? This doesn't seem to fit with the Hasidim thing?
Well, I guess like it seems like maybe I don't know, maybe it's just my simple understanding of it. I don't like look at meforshim. I guess I am confused about the giving thing, but it seems like maybe it just the relationship to your items or to be a
Right.
giving person, give tzedakah, which is like we kind of already. I guess like
Okay.
what is the new idea in this
Okay,
mishnah?
good. All right. So that's what I was wondering if you're gonna say. So if this is about tzedakah, which I think it's pretty clear from the context from David, that seems to be about tzedakah, right? Then isn't this just a basic mitzvah, right? Like, of course we should give to him, right? Do you really need to tell Hasidim? Hasidim are going beyond tzedakah, like you have tzaddik and then chassid. So aren't they already doing this, or shouldn't they already be doing this? Okay. What else? Yeah, Ayala.
Okay, and what you just said kind of made me think of like another thing about give to him. Like
Yeah.
if that means I guess what does that mean? Like how can you give to him besides for you owning it? But like does that like God can't really like
Okay,
receive
right.
anything either.
Okay, good. Right. So how can let me just I'll put that here. Okay, so how can in what sense are you giving to him, right? You can't actually give anything to God. Yeah, that was actually
And
why.
then if it's tzedakah,
yeah.
how is that?
Yeah, and if
To him.
it's tzedakah, how is this to him? Yeah, I think I call this shiur giving to God or something like that. That was designed to provoke that question. Yeah. All right, I think there are a couple more questions. Yeah, Ella?
I guess what does it mean that because you
Yes,
are
okay, good.
his?
That's one of the major questions, right? So what does it mean that you are his, right? How is this different from what is yours is his? Yeah. And it's interesting. So it says, how's everything is his? So actually we have to augment this question here. How is you and what is yours are his, the rationale for giving, right? In other words, it sounds like you need both components in order to say, but it's interesting. It's only instructing you to do one thing. It's saying, give to him from what is his. Okay. Which I guess does mean you and what is yours, but it does break it down to two. So yeah. Okay. Anyone else?
I guess what does the pasuk add
Okay,
here?
good. All right. So what does the pasuk add here? What does the pasuk add? Yeah, and it's funny. I like the way that you asked it because if you said like, how is this reflected in the pasuk? I think that's pretty obvious. But what does it add? Like, why do we need the pasuk? And furthermore, there's another question which I did not think was a good question until I saw it in. I had this question, and I was not sure if it was a good question until I saw it in the Abravanel. Is there anything weird to you about? Okay, I don't know. I don't know if you're going to be able to pick up on this. Anything weird to you about how it introduces the pasuk? Like anything unexpected?
Like, why does it say bedavid? Like,
Okay, so you could say that maybe you should just let us know that what do you call? Maybe you should just quote the pasuk and we should know that it's David. That's a fair question. That's almost a better question than the one I'm going to ask. How are psukim usually introduced when they're quoted for a raya? Like what word is used?
Shenemar or
Yeah,
something?
shenemar or kedichsiv. So the Abravanel actually asked this question. I'll show it to you inside later on. I'm gonna just lump this here. Furthermore, why does it use the word v'chein, likewise, to introduce the pasuk? Okay, usually it would use shenemar or dichsiv. Okay, also, why specify David? Can't we get that from context? Yael?
Is it weird? I don't know if I like know enough about this, but is it weird that it says hu omer? Like v'chein bid David hu omer. Like it says in David, or is that
Yeah,
just
that is
grammar?
strange. Yeah. Yeah. You know what it might mean though, actually, now that I think about it. I think, yeah, I mean, here's how I'm tempted to read it. Likewise, David, or you know what, it's probably like this. I think this is actually, I'm just gonna translate this one. Likewise, in the case of David, he says, although it is weird because he's not saying in the present tense. Yeah, it is strange. Yeah. Yeah. I'm
Or is
not
it
sure
God says or no?
No, because it's David talking, right? Because he's talking to God.
Right.
Yeah. Unless the other option is, I actually don't know who wrote Divrei Hayamim. I think it was Yirmiyahu who wrote Divrei Hayamim. And so maybe that the author of Divrei Hayamim says about David, but either way, it's weird. Either way, it's weird. Okay, I think there's only one more. Okay, I think there's two more questions that we need to ask. Possibly more, but two more that I have at least. What do we usually ask when it tells us to do something? I know it's a really vague question.
Like, what is the case?
Okay, I think that would be included under what are you supposed to give? I'll just add that here. What is the what scenario is this addressing? So I'm going to say, what is the Hava Amina, right? And again, Hava Amina being like, why do we need to be told this? What would we think if we didn't have this, right? What would we think otherwise, or why would we think otherwise? In other words, there are two possibilities for what the Hava Amina is. Either we would think that we should give, but we wouldn't do it because of this reasoning, or we would think that we don't have to give, or we would think that we don't belong to him. Like there's different ways you could go about it. Okay, and then the last question is one which I'm actually going to read to you from the Abravanel, and then from that other commentary I referenced. So the Abravanel says, okay, so first of all, actually, no, it's not from the Abravanel. I'm just going to read from this other source. So I don't know who this is, Yain Levanon. It is Rav Naftali Hertz Wesley, 1725 to 1805 in Hamburg. Don't know who he is. But he writes, he says, La'achar Shoshana Rabbeinu Mishanasan Mishnasan Shorishonim Shadabru al HaTorah al Havodav al Gemilas Chasadim Devarim. That is not the right Mishnah. Gotta actually go to the right Mishnah here. Okay, so he says like this. This Mishnah has nothing to do with what came before and what came after it. Shekulam medabrim al Torah. All of them speak about the Torah. V'hi medaberes al tzedakah, and this is talking about tzedakah. Shekem pirshua kol meforshim masechta zatzal. That's how all the commentators explain it. Okay, which is actually not true. V'ein dati nocha bezeh. He says, my mind is not settled with this. Okay, and he brings up Lauren's point. The mitzvah of giving is explicit in the Torah and in the Mishnah. What is this doing in the context of a teaching for Hasidim? Okay, so he explicitly asked the question that we always ask. Sharitana didan lo hisir rakshin nitain matanosenu benefesh chapetza kimishalo anu nosnem. The Tana of our Mishnah is telling us to give with a desirous soul because we're giving from God's own thing. Kvar Amra Torah, the Torah already says, Lo ta'amis es levavcha. You should not strengthen your heart against this. V'yoser yikshe ma sheshana. That's the losa say against withholding tzedakah. V'yoser yikshe ma sheshana v'chein David Omer v'hu rai gemura. So I think he's saying, why does the Tana need to mention the pasuk? In fact, you don't need the Mishnah once you have the pasuk. When it says you and what is yours belong to him, that's included in the statement because when it says everything belongs to God, that's talking about man and everything on earth. Okay, so the question here is I'm going to actually add to our question of what is this doing in Pirkei Avos? So I'm going to add to that. Furthermore, once you have the pasuk, why do you need this mishnah at all, right? It's already explicitly stated in the pasuk that is quoted, right? So it's funny that he has a teaching and then he backs it up with an open pasuk that says exactly the same idea, like just have the pasuk, okay? And then the last question is what is this mishnah doing? Oh, you know what? Hold on just a second here. I'm actually gonna put this in the question about the pasuk. Oops. Put this in the question about the pasuk, and then put this here. Okay, so what is this mishnah doing here? In the middle of a series of mishnayos about learning. Okay, and this is seemingly about tzedakah. Okay, and by the way, that Yain Levanon is almost correct. I forgot if I just said this. He says that everyone interprets this to be about tzedakah. There is one person other than Yain Levanon who learns this about learning, but we're going to go ahead and take the tzedakah approach for now. Yain Levanon, I only discovered him like a few minutes before the shiur, and his answer is way too long for me to read, so I don't know what he says. But it's I'm sure judging by his questions, I'm sure his answer is at least enlightening. Okay, all right. So I think those are our questions here. Okay, so what do we say? Anyone have any ideas? And I don't think that this is the most difficult mishnah in Pirkei Avos to crack, especially compared to last time. So like, if the idea seems simple, don't dismiss it. Like, maybe we'll just talk it out. And like I said, the three meforshim we're going to focus on tonight all kind of like give the same core idea, but they have different nuances. Yeah, Ayala?
I was thinking, just like a side point. I mean, besides for the idea of like, I guess everything being Hashem's, because Hashem created everything. Yeah. Maybe like what it's doing with the wording of like using vague-ish pronouns is like it's causing you to question like who those pronouns are referring to.
Okay.
And like in that questioning is coming about like the recognition. Because it's counterintuitive to like not counterintuitive, but against our nature to recognize that what is ours is Hashem's.
Right. Okay, good. So I was thinking along the same lines, but from the other perspective, which is that somehow, okay, I don't know how exactly I say this, but when you use pronouns deliberately erase the differences between the beings who you're talking about, right? So if I say like if I said Ayala, Lauren, and Yael, those are just the names that are on my screen right now. Then if I said her, and her, when I say all three of them as pronouns, I'm just kind of like equating all of them, which makes you then compare and contrast them. So like I was thinking the fact that it says this is his, not yours, it's putting you in the same zone, and then making you like prompting you to question, who it's belonging to. In other words, Ayala is saying when you say his, whenever you have a pronoun, the mind goes to the thing and says, wait, who is that referring to? So you like arrive at the insight that it's talking about God naturally. I'm making a complementary point to that, which is that that by not explicitly highlighting like this is God's, not yours, then it's putting you in the same zone and like getting you to realize like the I don't know how to say it. All right, maybe what I was saying is better, but yeah, Alex.
Maybe by recognizing that like material things aren't yours, you'll be more likely to share in that for people who have less.
Okay, so I think you're correct. The question is, how does that work psychologically, right?
It like forces you to think in a more like collectivist way, because these things aren't yours inherently. You don't have ownership of things.
Okay. All right. So in other words, the primary resistance that we have when it comes to giving stuff is it's mine. So this is directly attacking that and saying, no, it's not yours. Right. So just from a psychological standpoint, then it's breaking the thing that gives you the most resistance to giving. Now, this is a side question I have that's going to apply to all of the mefarshim that we read, which is the thing that fascinates me about this mishnah is, to what extent is the insight in this mishnah an intellectual insight, and to what extent is this a psychological device? Okay, like there's certain, let's say in I don't know, in the more nevuchim, he's giving you like new ideas about reality, and that may or may not have an emotional impact. In Mishlei, he's often telling you things you already know, but trying to impact your emotions. Pirkei Avos, I'm not exactly sure where the typical ideas fall along, like which of those two sides. And I think that it's a question here. But according to the way Alex is explaining it, then it sounds like the main thing is the emotional punch. Yeah. Okay, anyone else have any answers or observations here? Directions, approaches?
I mean, it doesn't sound like it's, oh, sorry.
No, keep going.
Should I keep going? Okay. It doesn't sound like tzedakah to me. Like,
okay.
Give to him, like to Hashem, in the way that David did when they consecrated things to the temple.
Right.
Not like give to other
That's
people.
a great point. Okay, that's a great point. So two arguments for why it's not talking about tzedakah, which is, one, you don't think of tzedakah as giving to God. You think of it as giving it to God's creatures, right? God, his creations. So secondly, David was giving material riches, but there you could describe it as giving to God because it was for the glorification of God's name in the Beis Mikdash. Okay, so those are two very good arguments for why this might not be tzedakah. Okay, good. So now the question would be, either what is he talking about then? Back to the question that you originally asked, Yael, is what are you supposed to give? Or if this is tzedakah, then why is it being characterized as giving to God? Okay, that was a good step. You could always tell good steps when they sharpen the questions and open up avenues. Yeah. And I think, by the way, just to keep your eye on the ball here, I think a key thing is you and what is yours are his. Okay, like I'm not even saying that based on an idea. I'm just saying like I think it's very easy to read this and just kind of like ignore that fact, but it's there. Yeah, Lauren.
I'm wondering if maybe like this mishnah, like following up on the point that you were talking about, if it's intellectual versus like impacting your psychology, if it's like maybe about your whole relationship to your stuff, like to material items. So it's like to recognize that even if you think it's yours, it's not actually yours. And that it's like, it's emotional, it's psychological, but it's also in the reality too, because in a second it could all be gone. Like we can't predict the future, and like God is in control of the whole world. He knows what could happen. Like there could be a big storm and your house gets ruined. Right. You know what I mean? Like it really, or God forbid your children could die. Like there's just like so many things that could possibly happen. So maybe it's about recognizing, your place in the world with relation to your stuff. And then that could affect how being a giving person in terms of tzedakah, but also just in terms of like other types of chesed.
Okay. All right. That's really good. That's reminding me of a source that I actually forgot to include here. So actually, let me say this first of all. So I think one of the questions that we're going to have to tackle here is, what does ownership mean? Right. I think it's hard to dodge that question. Right. So one of the things Lauren is saying is that we think of stuff as ours, but you could lose it in an instant. And I want to read to you from one of my favorite, this is definitely one of the top 5 chapters in the Moreh Nevuchim, in my opinion, is towards the end, when the Rambam goes through the 4 types of perfection, or 4 types of excellence. You know what? Hold on just a second here. Is this my best translation? Moreh Nevuchim. I just want to see if I have this as a separate file. G4. No, that's even worse. Hold on. Do I have it on my blog? Moreh Nevuchim 354. All right, fine. We'll just we'll use this. Okay, fine. So I just don't know if this has errors in. Okay, so we're not going to read the whole thing. So he says, Rambam says in the last chapter of the Morning Wisdom, here now what I have to say, given the above explanation. The ancient and modern philosophers have shown that man can acquire 4 kinds of perfection, and maybe substitute the word excellence for perfection, because it doesn't mean like being perfect. It means like areas that you can like have perfection in. The first kind, the lowest, which most people spend most of their days trying to acquire, is perfection of material possessions. The possession of money, garments, furniture, servants, land, and the like. The possession of the title of a great king also belongs to this class. And here's what he says. There's no close actual connection between this possession and its possessor at all. It is a totally circumstantial relationship, and most of the pleasure derived from it is totally imaginary. And by that, I'm referring to when a person says, this is my house, this is my servant, this is my money, and these are my hosts and armies. For when he examines himself, he will find that all these things are external and their qualities are entirely independent of the possessor. When, therefore, that relation ceases, he who has been a great king may one morning find that there is no difference between him and the lowest person, and yet no change has taken place in the things which were ascribed to him. The philosophers have shown that he whose sole aim is in all his exertions and endeavors is the possession of this kind of perfection only seeks perfectly imaginary and transient things, and even if these remain his property all his lifetime, they do not give him any perfection. Okay, so very well said. Of course, the Rambam doesn't need my compliments, but you view your ownership as somehow making you superior. I own all this stuff. I am rich. I have a title. I am famous. But those things really have no actual connection to you. It's just circumstantial, and it could vanish in an instant. And it is not related to your essence. And then the Rambam is going to go on to say that there are other perfections. Perfection of the body in terms of health, beauty, strength is closer to you, because that actually is related to your body, but it's not related to your essence. Your essence is your Tselem Elokim, and your body is you have in common with animals, and you're never going to be faster than a cheetah. You're never going to be stronger than a gorilla. So like stop competing, And then the second highest one is perfection of your midos, which is something that's truly yours, because animals can't perfect their midos, but it belongs to you as a physical creature. Because if your soul doesn't have personality traits, and your soul in Olam Haba is not going to have any personality, it's just your knowledge, and your perfection of midos is only necessary as a means to perfecting your knowledge, and a lot of midos are only necessary when you're interacting with other people. So that's when he says the highest level is perfection of your mind, which is what is truly you, and it truly belongs to you, and it will last forever. And then once you perfect your mind, that will in turn cause you to behave with good midos, and that's like a higher level of perfection of midos. Okay, so that's just a summary of the rest of the Rambam. But for our purposes, he's making the point that Lauren is making, which is that all this stuff is not really yours. Okay, so that half answers the question of what ownership is. In the sense that, and what it means that it doesn't belong to you, that you may feel like you own it, but there's no actual connection between you and the stuff, and it can be taken away at any moment, and it doesn't really add to your perfection. Okay, that's a good step. Okay, so where does that leave us now? So the question then is, going back to Yael's question, though, what is it? So Yael initially said she doesn't think that this is talking about wealth, because then why is it saying give it to God, and don't bring a proof from David because he wasn't giving to tzedakah, So are we going to say this is talking about something else, or are we going to say this is talking about tzedakah and it's characterizing it this way for some reason? I think both avenues are still open. Yeah, Ayala?
I think that you could say that it's talking about tzedakah, and I also think that like the highlight of, because you and what is yours are his, because like that's, I think, like pointing to the point that like even you, which like that's your entire identity and whatever you think you are, like has no basis outside of like what it was, like you didn't earn to be you, or like you didn't earn anything because you don't even exist outside of God.
Right.
So like maybe I feel like it kind of reminds me of the idea of like subjugating your will to his, because once you realize everything is his, then obviously you're going to do with it what he wants because it's his. So like if what he wants is tzedakah, then it's in a sense it's giving it to him.
Okay, good. So this is a good lead into the other definition of ownership. Okay, so we said that you don't truly own stuff. Okay, yet we have a definition of ownership in halacha, right? So like, what, legally speaking, what does it mean to own something? Okay, and you got to answer that question without just saying, well, it means you have it, So what is it? Yeah, Alex.
if somebody took it away from you, it would be a crime.
Okay, I would say that's a sign of the ownership, right? That it would be a crime, but that's not what ownership, what constitutes ownership. What is ownership? Yeah, Lauren.
Maybe like you're responsible for like you are the one liable if someone
So that
something happens to it.
that is related, but the thing is like this: is let's say I own something, but I pay you to guard it. So now you are responsible, even though I own it. Yeah.
I'd say it's like the exclusive rights for using it.
Okay,
Doing
good.
what you
So
want with it.
that's exactly it. So ownership is the legal right for utility. And the way that I actually first heard this definition was in the context of okay, this is a side halachic tangent, but it is I think it's good to know in general, and it'll help illustrate the idea. I first heard this, I think, in my second year of yeshiva when we were doing the topic with Rav Pesach of the issur of owning chametz on Pesach. Okay, and the way Rav Pesach expressed it is ownership is the right to define the object. Okay, and practically speaking, what he means is using it. But let's say I have a water bottle, right? So I can drink it, I can sell it, I can give it as a gift, I can prohibit it through neder to make it like a usher to other people. I can donate it to the Beis Mikdash and define it as kodesh. So I have the right to designate the uses of the thing. I can lend it, right? I can rent it, right? So all these things I could do with it. And all of those things stem from the fact that I am the owner of it, and the owner is the only one who can do that. Okay. The reason why this came up in Pesach is it's a very funny thing. Okay, and again, this is a side point, but it is it's just an interesting halachic quirk. On Pesach, it is usher to have hana'ah from chametz. It's usher to benefit from chametz. Okay, so the problem, and that issur kicks in as soon as Pesach starts. Okay, but the issur to own chametz is present for all 7 days of Pesach. So the way halacha expresses it is it says that chametz is an object that once Pesach starts, it's not in your ownership, but halacha creates a separate definition of ownership just to make you able to be liable for the issur, for the prohibition. In other words, like as soon as Pesach starts and chametz becomes usher to benefit from, since the definition of ownership is the right to like use the thing, so then halachically, if it's usher to benefit from, you can't own it. So in order to have a prohibition to own it, halacha creates this artificial Pesach definition of ownership, and then imposes it on the chametz. I know it's like a halachic technicality, so maybe I shouldn't have brought it up. But the takeaway here is that ownership is the right to define the use of something, okay, or to define the definition of something, to use it. So now we can explain. So what does it mean then that God is that God owns it? And in fact, we call God what name of God do we use that implies ownership? We use this at least every day, multiple times a day, depending on how many times you daven.
Konei hakol.
Konei hakol, right? So konei hakol literally means that God. So it's funny in biblical Hebrew. This comes from Malki Tzedek, I believe. Konei Shemayim va'aretz. And I just want to see what the BDB dictionary says about this, if it says it for both meanings here. The BDB is the dictionary that is on Torah, which you can click on the phrase kone, which is to get or acquire, to buy. Okay, fine. Yeah, so we do say that it means to create and to acquire. So the idea is one, that God creates, and by creating, he acquires it. So what is the idea that God is the owner of everything? How would you express it based on what we said ownership is? Because obviously, let me modify this a little bit. That we initially said ownership is the right to use the thing, right? But God doesn't use stuff in the sense that he doesn't get benefit out of it. Yeah, Alex?
So God has the right to designate the
He has the right
usage.
to designate the usage. Exactly, right? So he's the designer of things. He's the creator of things. So he has the right to designate what it should be used for. Okay. So now we have a full idea of what it means that you don't own stuff, whether it's your objects or yourself, and God does own it, which is that you don't own it because in the sense that it's not actually yours and it can be taken away instantaneously. God does own it in the sense that he created it and he could say what it should be used for, both for yourself and your money. And what is like the ownership that we do have? Because again, there are halachos about stealing, right? So there's such thing as ownership. So that is just a legalistic definition of ownership, not a true ownership, right? That God has, because human beings need resources in order to function, and you need laws governing those resources to have a society. So then God gave us a legal definition of ownership, which we do own, which is how he can say, give him what is yours. So give to him what is legally yours, because you and what is yours are truly his. That's how we would like plug it into the Mishnah. Yeah. Okay, good. So we've answered a lot of our questions. Okay. It's funny, we still have the two avenues open from that Yael mentioned, that either this is talking about tzedakah and it's characterizing it as being owned by God because this would break through the resistance that we have and or give us some idea, or it's not talking about tzedakah. So anyone want to make an argument for, I mean, it could be both also, but like, I guess anyone want to comment on which of those two seems to be the better read?
What would not for tzedakah practically mean? Besides like giving to the
Good
base
question. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm asking also. Like, what would it mean to give yourself to God, right? Because it's saying you and what is yours are his. So this is telling you to give. So giving what it belongs to you to him would be using your money for the purposes that God designates. So what would giving yourself to him be? Yeah, Alex?
Potentially like learning and stuff like that, because God designates your like chokmah and stuff like that, and you're the one that actually has to use it. And like,
okay, so I would say it definitely applies to learning, but really it would seem to apply to anything that is that you were designed to do, right? So that could be learning, that could be chesed, that could be doing tzedakah, that could be mishpat, So I think that both of these really fit in. In other words, I don't think it seemed like these were two like mutually exclusive ways to take it, but I think that both of them can be. I think the larger reading is everything that you have and everything that you are was designed and therefore designated for specific uses by God. And therefore, he's the one who should really dictate how this goes. And that would translate practically into you following his will and also you giving your possessions to use for his will. Yeah.
Would that not mean like just doing the mitzvot in general? You're saying it's more specific to chesed and tzedakah, or like...
So I was just giving those as examples from what Alex was saying, but I do think that it applies to doing the mitzvahs in general. But now the question then would be, really, what is this doing in Pirkei Avos? Because this does not seem to be something that is only necessary for Hasidim or only relevant to Hasidim. So can we answer that? Yeah, Ella?
Definitely not a full answer, but it could be that there is something like you could be doing all the mitzvahs but still not have this idea, I feel like.
Correct. Yeah. Okay, good.
And like maybe that's what it's
okay, good.
adding.
Yeah. In other words, you could be doing all the mitzvahs out of like ironically, the Chazal talk about doing the two levels of doing mitzvahs, doing it out of yira and doing it out of ahava. And yira is doing it for a reward or out of fear of punishment. And it seems like doing it out of those two motives is not really acknowledging that everything belongs to God. Because and the reason why, I mean, actually, I don't know. If you agree with me, see if you can explain why doing it out of fear of punishment or desire for reward is not doing it for this reason. And if you disagree with me, then go ahead and disagree. Yeah, Alex?
I agree insofar that when you have good intentions and depth of why you're doing things, you'll do them better and you'll engage with them more. So
yeah,
it's coming from a place of like, oh, Hashem is like the creator of everything, and there's like a design, and I need to be a good person, versus like a fear. If it's more fear-based, your actions won't have as much intention behind them and they won't be as strong or good necessarily.
Okay, that I think that's definitely true. I guess what I'm looking for, I'm looking for if we can test out Ayala's theory about this, which is Ayala was saying you could be doing all the mitzvos and not have this idea that you and what belongs to you are God's, and I belong to God. And what I'm saying is like, can we see that in the person who's keeping the mitzvos out of fear? Yeah, Lauren.
Maybe it's like, I feel like it's like kind of recognizing like your place in the universe. Like if I was created for this purpose to serve God, like what is man here for? Like it's coming from what, like if you're doing it out of fear, it's kind of like, okay, maybe I'll get a reward or I might get punished, or it's not coming from like a true recognition of like my whole point of being in this earth and why God created me is to serve God. You know, like so that's what man's designed for.
Okay, good. So that's actually a different answer than the one I was giving, but I think I like your answer better. I'll tell you what I was going to say. I was going to say that doing mitzvahs out of fear of punishment or desire for a reward is conditional. And the condition is if I didn't get rewarded or if I didn't get punished, I wouldn't do it, which means that you're not really recognizing that this is what you were created for. But I think the way that you're saying it is even better, because it's saying that that like the person who's doing it out of fear of punishment or desire for reward, there's me, and then there's my actions. I could do it almost like an exchange. I'll do this and I'll get the reward, or I won't do this and I won't get the punishment. But it's not really taking the self into account, that I have a certain design and that design needs to be met regardless of reward and punishment. So I think those are two complementary answers also. Okay, and that's something that, so could we just answer why is that for Hasidim specifically? In other words, this idea I think is relevant for all of us, but I think that you can make an argument that developmentally speaking, then this is more proper for Hasidim. I think you make several arguments, but anyone have any ideas? Why would this be like in the book of how to become a Hasid? Yeah, Ayala?
I think it will lead to like a complete lifestyle shift if like every single decision that you make, you're looking from the framework of like, this is God's and what am I going to do with it?
Right. Okay.
And that's like a crucial lifestyle shift.
Okay. I think that is a good answer. That it's we're not just talking about a particular in your avodas Hashem. We're talking about your entire orientation towards life and reality and everything you're doing. Yeah, I was going to say something else again. I think there are several answers to this. I think that this, I think the first step is you have to actually be doing the mitzvos, and then once you're doing the mitzvos, then you could talk about doing it for the right purpose, like mitosh lo lishma ba lishma isn't just telling you, hey, you're going to eventually get to lishma. It's also saying you can't get to lishma without going through lo lishma first, So I do think you need to like be doing lo lishma. And also I think, to be honest, like to recognize what the purpose of your existence is requires a certain like high level of knowledge, and to recognize, to see past like, your ownership, to really realize that you don't really own anything. I think these things require like a high level of recognizing God as the creator, which I think not everyone is capable of doing in a real way. We could do it intellectually, like just, everyone reads Bereshit bara Elokim, but like to really like internalize that as a higher level. Okay, these are good answers. Yeah, Ayala?
I have a question on what you said about you have to do all mitzvahs before you could get to this level. Is that because of like some sort of psychological dissonance, or is that like a practical thing?
Good question. I mean, I'll tell you what I meant, but I don't know if I can answer your question. What I meant was that, like, let's imagine a person who is trying to work on this recognition in terms of like, I'm designed by God and therefore he has the right to dictate what I do. But in the meantime, the guy is speaking Lashon Hara and like, eating, food with questionable kashrus and all this, like it seems to be that I think maybe because of what you were saying, that this is like an entire, how do I put it? I don't know. I got to think about the question a little bit more. It's a good question though. Yeah, Yael?
I was just thinking it's interesting that his wording is like give to him, as in like there's kind of dual ownership.
Right.
Like we do have ownership in the sense that we're able to give it, but it's also Hashem. So it's kind of like he's saying, like, you define yourself and what you own, like in line with what Hashem defined as well. Like there's both sides to it.
Okay, that's good. So that I think that fits in line also with what with what Ayala was referencing earlier about the oh no, what was am I imagining this, Ayala, that you did reference the idea that if you're something about acting in line with God's will, and then your will becomes his will. Yeah, right. It's very, very similar to that lashon also of like, it's saying, yeah, you have ownership, but make your ownership in sync with his ownership, and that's why it's using both of them as pronouns. That's good. That's a good nuance. Okay. All right, so let's look at some meforshim. I think this is the first time that we actually like worked out a complete idea without looking at the meforshim, but that's pretty good. And astonishingly, the meforshim, again, I think it's impossible to learn this. I think all the ideas that are going to cluster around one main thing. So we're looking for nuances. We're not going to see completely new ideas here. Okay, first one is Rabbeinu Yonah. Oh, actually, first of all, there was an amusing thing I read in the Rashbats, which we don't take this derech of Pirkei Avos, but there are some mefarshim, mostly the Rashbats, but I think also some modern mefarshim who learn the statement in line with the context of who said it. So I think this is a little hilarious, and I'm not saying that to mock, but he says, Hapirsh na'im hadvarim hayotim mipiosem. How beautiful are statements that come from the mouths of those who do them. Ki zeha tana nizkar alav b'pirkei de chasidi. This Tana, who is mentioned in the chapter about Hasidim, meaning Elazar bar Batosa, okay, so he says this guy used to give away all of his money for tzedakah, so much so that the gabais, the collectors of tzedakah, would run away from him because he would just like try like shower them with money. So like he practiced what he preached. Let's put it that way. Okay, fine. Okay, so then first one I want to do is Rabbeinu Yonah. So he says like this. So this is talking both about a person's body and a person's money. Person should not withhold himself, nor should he withhold his money, his property from the will of heaven. This is what it means when it says what is you and what belongs to you belong to him. Sorry, I think this is supposed to be without a vav. You're not giving yourself, you're not giving what is yours, neither your body nor your money, but you're giving what belongs to God. Now he gives a good mashal here. Ki mamon ha'adam pikadon hu biado mishal kadosh baruch hu. Your money is like a pikadon, and I always forget how to say pikadon. Sometimes pikadon means collateral, but that's not what it means here. It means like, what do you call a thing like an object that you entrust to somebody? That's what pikadon literally means. Is there a word for that in English? Like a safekeeping, a keepsake? I don't know exactly what to call it. A treasure, whatever. It's a pikadon. It's a valuable object that was entrusted to you from God. Ella sheyesh yisron bo al shar hapikdonos. But there is an advantage over this pikadon over other pikdonos. Why? Because God gives you permission to use it for your own needs. V'hashar, and the rest of it, yitnehu ba'asher ratzon hamafkid melech malchim lachim hakadosh baruch hu tzivahu. The rest of it you can is for you to give to whoever the will of the king of kings, hakadosh baruch hu, says to give it to. V'yesh l'sameach harbe. You should be very happy. You should be very happy about the fact that you are allowed to benefit from this pikadon in dignity, and that you could do the will of the owner with a remnant. And he gives a good mashal. Mashal melech shenasan la'avdo elef zuzi. It's a mashal. You can compare this to a king who gave to his servant $1,000. V'amrlo, and he says, "Tol ata hamea la'atzmecha." You take 100 for yourself. L'tein hatesha meos l'tesha b'nei adam, and give the other 900 to nine people. V'halohu sameachu, won't he be happy? Okay, so I think it's a good mashal. It's a very resonant, emotional mashal, because if I go up to you and I say, hey, and let's say I bring up your bank account. Let's say you're at the ATM and like I'm peering over your shoulder and I see that you have $1,000 in your bank account. I say, oh, you got to give like you got to give $900 of that to strangers. You would feel like that's a violation of your rights. Okay. But if I just walk up to you on the street and I give you 1,000, if I whip out 10 $100 bills and I say, hey, this one's for you, give the rest to nine other people, you'd rejoice because this thing didn't belong to you anyway, And it's funny because I saw like not right before the shiur, like earlier this afternoon, I saw on Facebook I guess it was some sort of Christmas giving video or whatever, that this guy is at a restaurant and he says to the waitress, this is like in Las Vegas, and he says to the waitress, what is the most I guess she was pregnant, that's what it says, she didn't look pregnant, but whatever. There's the act of kindness to pregnant waitress. So this guy says to this waitress, what's the biggest tip that you've ever gotten in this job? And she said $100. So then he gives her $1,300. Okay, and he says keep $1,000 and give the other 300 to charity, and like she breaks down crying and like is all happy and stuff, So it is interesting that like psychologically you really do relate to it in a very different way if you're given this money than if you view it as yours. And I don't know how many of you had this experience, but like I kind of related to this with the stimulus payments during COVID, like it was just free money being given. And like I remember the first stimulus payment I had to use to like buy stuff for Pesach, because this was the first time I was stuck here and I had to make my own Pesach. But like the second one, I don't know if I gave it all to tzedakah or if I gave like a lot of it to tzedakah, but it felt like, oh, I'm just being given this free money, so of course I should just give it to tzedakah. It was much easier than giving that same amount if it was like from my paycheck, So the funny thing is when I was learning this Rabbeinu Yonah, we didn't finish reading the Rabbeinu Yonah, I realized. Let's just see if this adds anything. He quotes the pasuk from David, but Malcolm Acher Ksiv Sham, later on it says, Miyadcha hi ulecha hakol, that from your hand, this is from your hand and to you belongs everything. Haguf, this is about the body, that he used his body to prepare to build the base of Mikdash. That's what it says at the beginning of the pasuk, that we like mustered up all of this ability, this generosity to give to you from everything. He's not really explaining, I don't think, the full implications of the quote. But the interesting thing is when I was reading this Rabbeinu Yonah, I was like, okay, this is a nice psychological trick, but is it also an insight or is it just a psychological trick? But according to the idea we explained, this is the trick that you should use to pair with the genuine intellectual insight that everything really is from God and he dictates it, And it reminds me of a pasuk in Mishlei. I should have put this in the thing also. Okay, I'm going to show you a pasuk in Mishlei, which is not exactly the idea, but it's reminiscent of the idea. Okay, Gozel Aviv. I think it's in one of the late 20s in Mishlei. Okay, so the pasuk says, Mishlei 28:24. Gozel Aviv v'imo, the Omer in Pasha chaver hu li'ish mashchis. So a person who robs his father and mother and says there's no sin, he is a fellow or a friend, a companion to the destructive person. So the Metzudas David, I hope, says, in Pasha. So what does it mean that he steals from his parents and says that there's no sin? Ki halo hakol sheli hema achar mosam. So this person is saying, once my parents die, I'm going to inherit the money anyway, so it's basically mine. Okay. So the funny thing, so what's wrong with that? So he's, hold on a second. So he says, this person is a companion to the guy who actively destroys people, the gozo rechusham, and steals their money. Because in the end, this person who's stealing from his father and mother is going to become someone who steals from everybody. Okay, so how does that work? So the explanation I had, ordinarily, if this was Mishlei, like we would all work on it, but like I don't think we have time. So my understanding of it is as follows: is this guy is really engaging in a rationalization. Okay, this is not he thinks he's actually giving real reasoning, but it's actually rationalization. How so? Because he's using the mechanism of inheritance to justify taking from his parents now. He's saying, I will inherit this so I'm just taking my inheritance early. Okay. But the thing is that he's being hypocritical. If you're really going to rely on the legal mechanism of inheritance to justify your actions, so then actually like rely on the legal mechanism of inheritance, like wait till you inherit it. In other words, you can't like use a legal justification to rationalize an illegal action, which is what this guy is doing. And since he is really just giving into a rationalization, but not acting based on reason, it's only a matter of time before he starts rationalizing overt types of theft, So does that idea make sense? I don't want to go on before we clarify that. If anyone needs any clarification, I can try saying it another way if it's not clear. Okay, so what does that have to do with our pasuk? So I think it's a similar move that this person is making, is if he says, this money is mine, okay? So no, it's not yours. Everything belongs to God, and God gave a system of legal ownership, and that same Torah that legislates that system of ownership also legislates that you give to tzedakah, and that you do mitzvos and all this other stuff. In other words, that rationalization, that feeling of it's mine and I can do with it what I want. Well, who says it's yours? Who says it's yours is the source of the laws that govern ownership. And that same source is saying, this is what you should do with your money and with your life, So like, you can't buy into that halfway just so you could take the money and then not do what the giver of the money says, So I think that is related to that pasuk. But the main idea of the Rabbeinu Yonah is he's giving you the perspective that you should view this as something that was entrusted to you, that God allows you to use. Since money is fundamentally utility, God is giving you the utility of this money, but really it belongs to him. In the sense that it all comes from him, and you're not going to take it with you when you die, and like all the legal mechanisms are his, and all of your ability to use it is his, and all the factors that allow it to be retained by you, are up to his will. So I think, but the main takeaway from Rabbeinu Yonah is the psychological mechanism you can use of treating it as a pikadon, not treating it as something that is actually yours. Okay, any questions on that? Okay, the next two ideas are very short. Okay. The Meiri says, "Hu sheba lahayir ha'adam shelo yehe eno tsara b'nesinas hatzedakos v'hotzas mamono l'chabod Hashem." This is telling you that a person should not be tsar ayin, which means stingy, in giving tzedakah or spending money for the kavod Hashem. Now, spending money for the kavod Hashem can mean a lot of things. It can mean mitzvos. It can mean for for learning. It can mean for like doing chesed, all this other stuff. And I think he phrases it this way because that's what David Melech was doing, is giving for kavod Hashem in the base of Mikdash. But kavod Hashem is more than just the Mikdash. Okay, then he says, "V'shiyakir ki mishalohu." You should recognize that this belongs to God. Oh, sorry, ki mishalohu no sein lo. That from what belongs to God, he is giving to God. V'imkein roy litain baruchav levu v'simcha. Therefore, it's proper for him to give with generosity and simcha. And then he quotes a midrash, but his version of the midrash is truncated. So I'm going to quote the actual midrash. So it says, okay, hold on. The midbar 23:23. Hold on just a second here. Let me just get my. Did I not look at this pasuk? I didn't look at this pasuk. So it says in Bamidbar 23:23. I might be cutting off part of the midrash. Hold on. Oh no, you know what? The Meiri's version of the midrash looks like it starts from a different pasuk. Mi hikdimani va'ashalem klum. Yeah. So who came before me that I should pay? Okay. So this is from Eov. You know what? I'm just going to read the punchline here. Okay. So the punchline is like this. Mi kilis lafana ajlo nasati lo neshama. So this is like, okay, it does quote it. It just didn't say Eov here. Mi hikdimani v'ashalem. You know what? Sorry, let me just do a decent job of this. Let me get the actual pasuk in Eov. Hold on just a second. Okay, Eov is such a difficult Hebrew. Oh, it doesn't say where the pasuk is. Okay, hold on. Sorry about that. Mi hikdimani. Mi Hikdimani. Hakdimani? I don't know how to say it. So this is from Eov 41:3. So let's see what the archaic translation says. It says, who has given me anything beforehand that I should repay him? Okay, so this is from God, right? That's sufficient. So God is saying, who has given me anything beforehand that I should repay him? And then it gives a bunch of examples, okay, in this midrash here. Who praised me before I gave him a neshama? Who spoke in my name before I gave him a male child? Who made for me a fence before I gave him a roof? Mi asali mezuzah achlo nasati lo bais. Who gave me a mezuzah before I gave him a house? Mi asali sukkah achlo nasati lo makam. Who made for me a sukkah before I gave him a place? Mi asali lulav achlo nasati lo damim. Who made for me a lulav before I gave him money? Mi asali tzitzis achlo nasati lo talis. Who made for me tzitzis before I gave him a talis? Mi hivrish lefanai peah achlo nasati lo sade. Who separated the corner of the field before I gave him a field? Mi hivrish li truma achlo nasati lo goren. Who gave me truma before I gave him the threshing floor? Mi hifrish lefanai chala achlo nasati lo isa. Who gave me chala before? Who separated chala before I gave him dough? Mi hifrish lefanai korban achlo nasati lo behema. Who gave me a korban before I gave him a behema? Okay, fine. So a lot of examples here. So what do you get the vibe is that is being added by this midrash here? Because the message the Meiri is saying is almost the same, which is that you should not be stingy when you give tzedakah or when you when you spend money for Kavod Hashem. You shouldn't be stingy. So what is he adding by like having this whole list of stuff here? Yeah, Lauren?
I feel like he's like pointing out that like with all these mitzvahs that you think that like you're giving up for yourself to Hashem, it's really all like coming to you before. Like you think you're so great like giving this up, but Hashem gave it to you beforehand in order for you to give it back to him.
Exactly.
To do these different mitzvahs.
Okay, right, exactly. So I think it is the one word answer that comes to my mind that this is trying to like promote in you is gratitude. Okay, which Rabbeinu Yonah also had. But this is putting it in terms of like the examples that for some reason stood out the most to me is take peah, right? The mitzvah of peah is you're supposed to leave the corners of your field for the poor, right? So this guy who doesn't want to give peah from his field is being asked by God saying, what do you mean? I gave you this entire field and all I'm asking is that you leave the corners, right? For the poor. Right? Or I gave you this entire, let's say the person who's complaining about how much money it costs to like buy mezuzahs for all the doors. He's saying, God's saying, I gave you this house and all I'm asking is that you put mezuzahs on it. You know, like it is a kind of like pointing out how much of a jerk you would be if you like don't have that gratitude, you know, towards God about what he's given you. And then he's asking you like for these little things here, you know? And again, I think this is built on the ideas that we said that God is really the one who has the right to dictate the usage. He didn't have to give you the house, you know, but I think this is like a different framework. Rabbeinu Yonah is putting it in the framework of gratitude of like, you have this job to watch this safe, to watch this money, but God allows you to spend the money to take care of yourself and then to give the rest away. Meiri's talking about like, God gave you all of these things and like, this is all he's asking of you. You know, it's like slightly different, like emotional vehicle here. Okay, anyone have anything else on the Meiri? That's what I got from the Meiri. Okay, last one I wanted to go through is Rabbeinu Bachya, and I don't even know if we need to go through the whole thing, but this was the hardest for me to see. I sense he's saying a nuance, and I think I got half of it, but we'll see what we can get. Okay, he says, Yasir al tzedakos val maestros val kol davar mitzvah sheyischayv l'seis mimamono. So he does say it's about anything that you're spending money on, whether it's tzedakah, meiser, or mitzvos. Shlo yisatzel b'ma'as rosav umatanosav. You shouldn't be lazy in your tithes and your gifts. V'lo yihi elo tsarus ayin b'mamono, nor should you be stingy in your money. Ela sheyitin be'ein yafe uv'zrizos. You should give with a generous eye and with zrizos. Zrizos is the opposite of laziness. You should give it with zeal, energetically, with alacrity. Shalom mishal asmo hu nosein lo, elam mishal shalo yisparach. You're not giving from your own, you're giving from God, from what God has. V'zehu she'amar tein lo. This is what it means when it says give to him. Klomar beriboy. Oh, so he's responding to the to the lashon of give to him. It's a funny thing that he emphasizes. He says, give to him implies abundance. Ki kafishu yisbarach marbe lases lecha tova, in proportion to what God gives you of the good, techayev gam ata laharbos lases lo mishlo, then you are in proportion obligated to give abundantly. V'chein amar hakasuv, it says in Devarim, ish kamatnas yado kevirkas Hashem elokach asher nasan lach. Each man in accordance with his hand, each person in accordance with the gift of his hand, in proportion to the bracha that God gave him. Klomar, kafi mashi hirbelacha habracha, in accordance with what the bracha that God gives you. Shari nasina lashon ribuhu. Giving implies abundance. Klomar, kalashan, yitin perio. The fruits of the tree will give forth its fruit. It says it will give its waters. Hakol lashon riboy. Everything is in a lashon of abundance. Okay, I don't get that, because is it really saying that anytime it says give, then it means abundance? Like, how would you just say give if it was not abundance? Okay, pause here for 1 second. So what new points do we see from here? I see now two new points that we're not really highlighting in the other meforshim. Okay, 1 point I think is about the laziness and the energeticness, okay, of giving, because everyone else talks about generosity, but he's saying you shouldn't be lazy in giving, so because it's not really yours. So I think the analogy here, I think this is another emotional trick you can use, which is, let's say, like, I tell you to buy a gift for me, okay? So you might be a little lazy in doing that because it's something that, like, you're giving of your own to me, okay? But let's say like I order a package on Amazon and the guy accidentally delivers it to your house, and I call you up and I say, oh, can you like, give me my my package? You'd be like, oh, of course. Somehow the fact that, like, you're giving back something that doesn't belong to you makes you less lazy and more, like, eager to give it, because it's not really yours. Like, you owe it to someone else, So I think that is another, like, perspective that you can take on this that can help you to give tzedakah, which is that I'm just like, this isn't really mine. I'm just like, this is money that I owe, it's not something that's actually mine, which shows that I don't know if anyone else has the problem of, like, being lazy with their taxes, but, like, I do feel like the money is mine, and so, like, it's very easy to be lazy about that. Okay, the second idea is this idea of giving in proportion to the bracha that Hashem gives you. And I actually am going to read the rest of this, I think, because I think it is relevant. You should give, it says you should surely give. Okay, that's the same ideas. Okay, this is the lashon of the Torah. So there's a famous drasha on aser to aser, okay, which means, plain shot is you shall surely tithe. Okay, double lashon is always, like, emphasis. You should surely tithe. But does anyone know the drasha on aser to aser? So the drasha is aser. Don't read it as aser to aser, but aser to asher, that you should tithe so that you will become rich. Okay, and the way they read it is, he says like this. Im aser to aser shanim. So the way Chazal say it is aser to asher, aser bishvil shetis asher. You should tithe so that you should become wealthy. It means if you tithe, God will make you wealthy. So what I'm going to tell you ahead of time what he's going to do. Rabbeinu Bachya is so Chazal have the style of drasha where they, like, substitute the vowels, and they say, don't read it this way, read it that way. Rabbeinu Bachya is going to try to argue that you could get the same idea without changing the vocalization of the word. Okay, how so? Im aser to aser shanim rabos. If you will continually tithe for many years, hu yaspik l'cha she'ta'asher shanim rabos. Then she'ta'asher shanim rabos. Then God will provide you with the amount of money so that you can tithe for many more years. The hamshachas hamaser b'hasmada b'chol hashanim hu ha'osher. I don't know why there's a question mark. And the continuation of maser in all these years is wealth. V'zehu shadarshu Rabbeinu Zal aser ta'aser aser bishvil shatis asher. That's what Chazal meant in the drasha. V'lo lamed zeh mihipuch sibulas l'shibulas. Chazal are not learning it out from changing the shin to a sin. Ela mipashtus akasav atmo. They're learning out from the pshat. Shakol sibulas. Everything is, you should read as ta'aser. Umin hasibulas ba'atma nilamed nilmat ha'osher. Okay, fine. Actually, I think that's all we need to get here. So what he's saying is, he's saying like this. He's saying that the shot of the pasuk is that if you give tithes every year, God will make you wealthy so that you can continue giving tithes every year. Okay. So the idea he's saying here is like this, is I think this is yet another psychological trick that you can have that is in line with the truth, which is that people feel like they were made wealthy so that they could enjoy their wealth and spend it on themselves. But this is trying to change the paradigm and saying, no, God made you wealthy so that you can do good with your wealth, so that you can give to other people. Okay. And I have a shiur that I've been wanting to give for an extremely long time. But I have been putting it off because I don't want the political blowback. There's this idea that's very trendy nowadays called privilege. Okay. And I think that idea is a warped form of a true idea. Privilege is a warped form of the idea of bracha. Okay. So there's an idea with privilege, and again, I don't even, one of the reasons I also didn't want to give this year is I would have to do like a lot of research about the history of the evolution of privilege. But the way privilege seems to be used now, based on what I can tell, is in the social realm of like certain people have privilege and they have more opportunities available than others, and they face fewer challenges than others. That's all true. But the problem with the idea of privilege is it completely cuts objective reality out of the picture and just makes it all about social stuff. The Torah's idea of privilege is framed as bracha, okay, which is that if God blesses you with additional goods, whether that be wealth or talent or strength or whatever, then you have a corresponding responsibility to use that additional bracha for chesed, tzedakah, and mishpat. Okay. And the thing that I think is so much more psychologically healthy is you see that the way people talk about privilege is it all becomes this thing of guilt and blame and canceling and like all this stuff of you don't have the right to do this. You should be ashamed of the fact that you're white. You should be ashamed of the fact that you're rich. You should, it's all put in terms of negative terms. I think that the way that the Torah presents this is God blessed you with all of this good so that you could do good for others and fulfill his will. I think it gets to the same place as privilege in many ways, but it roots it in the objective reality of God's chesed, tzedakah, and mishpat, and puts it in positive terms and gratitude instead of like I'm so guilty for being white and for being Jewish and all that. It just drives me crazy. Like when I see that, and I don't even like involve myself in that world so much, so I can't even say that I'm like depicting it accurately. But from what I've gotten, then that's what it is. So I think this is like a healthy way of doing it. Of like God gave you this bracha so that you can, instead of saying so that I can enjoy myself, it's so that I can do good with it. And the more God gives me, the more I have a responsibility to do good with it. Yeah. Okay. So let's go and see if we answer all of our questions and then summarize all the takeaways, because I think we have one idea, but many ways to apply it from the meforshim here. Okay. So question number 1, what are you supposed to give? What is the subject of the command? What scenario is this addressing? So it's your money / property and yourself, your resources, like, your talents, whatever it is, and it's addressing everything. Okay. Your entire life, whatever. Okay. How is the you and what is yours or his the rationale for giving? What's the argument and what's the havamina? So the havamina is I own myself, right? And I own my money, right? Because that's how we feel. And legally, we do own our money. Okay. But the rationale is that ownership is the right to designate the use of something. And the one who creates the thing has the right to designate its usage. And God created everything. He's koneh hakol, and he actually gives us everything. So he really does have the right to use it. And the only ownership we have is, that's the answer to number 3. If it is truly his, then in what sense are you giving? Giving presupposes your ownership. Yeah, legally he gave you ownership because for the system of mishpatim to work, then people need to have ownership. But philosophically, it's not yours. Philosophically, it belongs to him. And there's all the points that Lauren mentioned also, and that the Rama mentioned, which is that you could lose this at any moment. So it's not truly yours. It doesn't add to your perfection. It's not, there's no actual connection between you and the thing, et cetera, et cetera. In what sense are you giving to him? You can't actually give anything to God. And if it's tzedakah, how's it to him? So I think the two answers we've seen so far are either it's giving to him in the sense that you're doing his will, or it's giving to him in the sense that you're giving it in a way that will bring kavod to Hashem, right? That it's glorifying Hashem because you're doing his will and you're fulfilling his purpose, his plan for the creation, right? You're bringing that into fruition, and that's kavod Hashem. 5, what does it mean that you are his? How is this different than what is yours is his? So you are his. So in principle, it's not different than what is yours is his. But I think in terms of we do have our resources and ourselves. I think we do view those as two different things. So I think that's why it divides them. Since Lo is talking about Hashem, why use the pronoun instead of the proper noun? So why does it leave it up to our inference? So there's Ayala's original answer, which is that by using the pronoun, it gets you to go through this thought process on your own. Then there's Yael's idea that it has to do with saying basically okay, this is legally yours, but you should sync it up to his, make what's yours his. And then there's the idea I was trying to say, but expressed very poorly, which is that it's, I don't even remember what it was anymore. So let's forget that. Okay. What does the pasuk add? And why is it used the word v'chein, and also why David? So I don't know. And I actually did not go into Divrei Hayamim to research it that much. It is an example of giving to kavod Hashem. So the Meiri has a good argument for that. And it is interesting because what, is maybe you can say it like this is, David references Shlomo, and David references all the stuff that David was doing to prepare for the Mikdash. David was not chosen to build the base of Mikdash, right? Yet he gave it his all to do whatever he could, given his who he was, for kavod Hashem. So I think it is a good exemplification of that even if you can't, give the ideal, you give whatever that you yourself have to offer, and that's really all that you can do, and that's all God asks of you. David can't build the base of Mikdash, but he can gather all the stuff to get it ready. How are we to understand this in the framework of Pirkei Avos? So I think our idea before that this is a very high level of recognizing that God created us and designates how we live, and also to do this presupposes that you are keeping the mitzvos and that you're not in the framework of Yira. So it is a very high level to really be able to do this, even though this level, I think the area where we ordinary human beings could practice this is with our money. Okay. And that is a mitzvah of tzedakah, and that I think we could use these tricks and tools here to help with that. And let's just use this now to review the tricks. And I call them tricks. I don't mean to degrade them, but they are ways to frame it psychologically to make it easier. So there's Rabbeinu Yonah's, which is that this is not yours. This is something that belongs to a wealthy owner that he's entrusting with you and saying you could benefit from it for your needs, but give the rest away. Psychologically, it makes it much easier to give to someone when you realize that it was given to you freely as a gift, like the waitress in the video that I need to try to find to send you. Then there's the Meiri, who says, God gave you this whole field and you can't give him a corner. God gave you this whole house and you can't buy mezuzahs. That it's saying God gives you this whole thing and all he's asking is this little thing. Okay. Then there is the Rabbeinu Bachya, which is that if it doesn't belong to you, then you won't be as lazy in returning it because it really belongs to someone else, and you should get on that really quickly. And then there's the other Rabbeinu Bachya idea that this is the reason why God made you wealthy is so you could use your wealth to help other people and to spend for God's will. That's why he made you wealthy. He didn't make you wealthy just so you could hoard it or use it just for your own pleasures, even though you can use it for enjoying life as well. Remember, there's halachos of tzedakah that you can't give more than a fifth of your money. And a tenth is the normal amount. Less than that is stingy. A fifth is the maximum amount, is very generous, but you really can't give more than that. So if you've given that amount, then go ahead and enjoy it, And then the last question is, what is this doing here in the middle of a series of mishnayos about learning? So there are meforshim, the Abravanel and that Yain Levanon, who learned that this is about learning. Okay. But maybe we'll leave that for your own thoughts. Because I did not get a chance to I didn't understand what the Abravanel was saying, and I didn't get a chance to read the Yain Levanon. And I guess we'll leave it as a question. We can discuss it in the chat later on if we want, about if this is about tzedakah and using your what God gave you for God's will. What is this doing in this series of mishnayos about learning? Okay, so we answered our questions and got another nice idea. Okay, any other points or questions here for tonight, or is this should we call it a night? Okay, let's call it a night. We could always discuss it on the chat. And reminder, no Pirkei Avos next week and no Friday morning thing next week. We'll take a break until after Hanukkah. Okay, have a good night.
I really like this mishnah, actually.
Yeah, me too. And there's
Very
something
cool.
nice about it, I think, after the last mishnah, which was exceedingly difficult. It's a nice, like, practical idea. It wasn't so hard to come up with, but it did have new insights. It's a nice little idea. And it's the type also that, like, I feel like the more attached to actions these ideas are, then the more benefit we're going to get. So I feel like anytime you give tzedakah, you can think of this idea. It's actually an asset that we have resistance to giving tzedakah, because you can actively like invoke this idea to like to overcome the resistance, as opposed to, for example, like I was last Shabbos we had an in Shabbos, and like we had like this get together at an oneg, and like I asked a couple of people afterwards, I said, did you feel the Shekhinah? And they're like, oh no, I forgot to think about that idea, that we were all gathered there. Like it's if we're on a high enough level, we would think about the Shekhinah anytime there was a gathering of people. But like it's easy to just not think about that idea. But with tzedakah, you're going to have some resistance, and then you could like remember this mishnah and be like, oh yeah, this is how I overcome the resistance. It's like a very implementable idea. Okay.
Are you able to pause the recording for a minute? I have a story.
Sure, definitely. I will pause.